Right guys, today we're going to be talking all about deloading. This is going to be a simple little deloading 101. What is a deload? Who needs a deload? When do those people need to deload? Why do they need to deload? And of course, how do we best deload? We're going to talk about the sort of three different main methods I've seen for doing deloads, sort of the three types we can apply. We'll just jump straight into it. So what is a deload? Basically, when we train, we get an accumulation of fatigue. Fatigue accumulates over a long time. Too much fatigue will mean our recovery drops off. Our ability to recover from that fatigue will drop, and therefore our performance will stall because we're not fully recovered and we've accumulated too much fatigue. And just with the food and the rest days that we have alone isn't enough to get rid of it. So what a deload seeks to do is wipe away a bunch of this accumulated fatigue. We get rid of as much as we can in as short a period as we can, which will mean that our recovery no longer drops off. That lack of fatigue accumulation will mean we've got more time to recover, so that recovery will pick back up, and hopefully after that performance will no longer be stalled, will be fully recovered, we'll have drained that glass, emptied that cup, got rid of that accumulation of fatigue, we'll be able to recover, and we'll be able to keep performing and get a super compensation of recovery to continue growing. So that's in essence what a deload is. Who needs to perform a deload? In most cases, beginners, people with less than 3 years of proper experience in the gym, their recovery is still going to be ample. They're not going to need deload weeks. They're not going to be lifting enough weight. They're not going to be accumulating enough fatigue, whether it's local or systemic. They don't need a deload. Intermediate and advanced lifters, people who are lifting bigger weights, more volume, more intensity, more understanding of their training, they might need deloads, especially when you get into that stage of pushing performance and progressively overloading for weeks on end. Obviously, if it was a linear process, we'd all be the size of a house by now. So those are the sorts of people that need to look at incorporating deload weeks when performance stalls. So we'll talk about when we think we need to deload and the symptoms and the signs that might help us know when we need to deload. So these are some of the telltale signs that we've accumulated too much fatigue, our recovery is dropped, and we need to possibly look at doing some form of a deload. We might have a drop in our motivation. If we're usually really motivated to train, hyped to train, love to train, and all of a sudden we start feeling like skipping days, skipping sessions, going easy, we might be mentally fatigued, systemically fatigued, and our body is trying to conserve some energy, and we're just tired, we're out of gas. If we have persistent soreness that is beyond the normal amount that we're used to, if we've got aches, we've got pains, we've got little niggles in our joints, in our muscles that we're not recovering from week on week, another great sign we need to deload. If we have a plateau in our lifts that can't be explained from like lifestyle changes and other factors, as in like you might have had a bad night's sleep, so you had a bad lift, that kind of thing, all your lifts are plateaued and you're not making progress, this is a sign that you're not able to recover from the stimulus that you're providing your body. You're not getting that super adaptation, time maybe to lower that down, get a little deload in there, get some more recovery. Also, poor sleep. I know I said poor sleep can affect your lifts, so you could blame the plateaus and the weak feelings on poor sleep, but sometimes poor sleep is a symptom we get when we need a deload, and it's a sign that we're overtrained and under-recovered. No pump or no strength. If you're used to feeling really strong in the gym and you're used to getting really good pumps, all of a sudden they go away, it's a great sign that you've accumulated a lot of fatigue and you're not able to push yourself as hard as you used to. And another really important one is poor digestion. People think the digestion and the training, they're not really linked, but when we're overtrained, all of a sudden we can start feeling a lot more bloated, a lot more gassy, and that nutrient partitioning just isn't doing as good of a job as when we're fully good to go. And it can be a great sign when we get stuff like diarrhea, problems with our water, inflammation, all of those things. It's a sign that we might need to have a little bit of a rest and a deload. So just quickly, before I talk about the different ways we can do a deload, actually talk about why we need to deload. It is to reset an accumulation of fatigue that we're not able to recover from, and then go harder after the deload, go back into accumulating that fatigue, go back into progressing those lifts, go back and hit the gym harder than before. It is not something we have pre-programmed in, that we just throw in there as like every 8 weeks I'll take a deload. It's something we add in as necessary, as we feel that fatigue accumulate. It's not something we book in like a holiday. It's something we go, right, I can feel these symptoms, I can feel these effects of accumulation of fatigue, I know I need a deload. You actually have a reason to do it, a why to do it, and then a progress to make after you finished your deload. So we'll talk about how we do some deloads, some different methods, some different techniques. So we're going to talk about how to deload, and the most common ways are having a deload week. So a 7-day training period, roughly, where we will either do a reduction in volume, a reduction in load, or a reduction of both, or a complete elimination of all. So the first way we can do that is by taking away 40 to 50% of the sets we do in a workout for a week. We keep the weights the same, and we just have a week where we do far less sets. So we're still moving the weights, still moving around in the gym, but we're dropping off a bunch of fatigue, and we should be good to go after that. We have the method where we will drop our loads. So we'll do the same number of sets, the same number of reps, but instead of doing, say, 100 kilos, we'll drop off 10-20%. We'll put 80 kilos on the bar for all of those lifts. So we're just going through those motions, just everything slightly lighter, getting a bit more blood moving. This will reset our recovery quite nicely. Or we can do a 30% reduction of both. So 30% less sets, 30% less weight. So if you're doing 3 sets of something with 100 kilos, you might go down to doing 2 sets with 70 kilos, for example. And that's a bit more on the extreme end, but it's a bigger deload. So it might reset if you've got more local fatigue, more systemic fatigue. It might be an option. And then what some people go for when they just feel completely beat is a full reset. Instead of a reduction, they just have a full week off. They'll eat obviously a little bit less because their output's a little bit less. So they'll go on a slightly slimmer diet. Maybe they'll still throw in their cardio. They'll keep active, but it will be a complete week off from the gym, and they'll go again. And then the other way we see things is more of this slow and steady reduction and of accumulated fatigue over a month, where we'll lower the sort of big lifts like squats, deadlifts, RDLs, all of those actually loading movements. We'll drop off a third of them, half of them. Sometimes people will just drop all of them for a month, let that CNS recover, bin off a bunch of that systemic fatigue and go again. And then there's also another sort of thing I see people do where they feel like they've got local fatigue on a certain muscle. So for example, their biceps or triceps or just one muscle on its own is super pooped. They'll just have that muscle be taken out for a week. So they'll do a full reset on just that muscle alone. So they'll train as normal for everything else, but they'll just drop out all of their tricep work for a week, and then they'll go again. Or they'll drop out all of their leg work for a week and they'll go again. And that is sometimes enough. That's sometimes all you need. And then, as I say, when do we need to deload? Why do we need to deload? If we still feel like after that week or that month or whatever we've chosen to do of a reduction that we're not recovering, we might need to then look at having a little bit more time off, or we need to look at our actual overall recovery and programming and whether we're just doing too much full stop, because you can throw in as many deloads as you like. If you keep training and you keep feeling absolutely pooped, there might be something underlying wrong that we can't just address with having a little week off, a nice mental reset, something, to make us feel like we're ready, strong to go again. Because that's an important part of a deload as well, is that feeling of, okay, I've reset, I'm ready, I should be able to go harder. If that's not happening and we're still running into barriers, then we need to address our training and our recovery. So let's break that down. Summarize, we are going to train hard for 4 to 8 weeks. As I say, it's when you feel that you need a deload, you're going to have accumulated fatigue over that time, and then we're going to need to go and deload. We'll get a super compensation from this extra recovery, and that is going to allow us to train hard again for another 4 to 8 week block. Sometimes these blocks are much longer than 8 weeks. We can get a solid run where we are progressing for 12 weeks in a row. And by progressing, I do mean progressively overloading. We're either adding reps or weight to the bar. We're not just going through the motions and then sort of like cheating that logbook and ego lifting those weights up. We're actually making real tangible progress and improvements to our lifts, to our physiques, to our composition. And then we're accumulating fatigue. We're noticing, as I say, those symptoms, those sort of stallings, poor digestion, poor sleep, poor lifts, feeling tired, down regulation in mood, all sorts of things we can notice. We can say, right, let's look at pulling this back. And if it's not enough just from doing these deloads every 8 weeks, every 4 weeks, if you feel like you need to deload all the time, it's possible that when we go back to those training blocks, those hard training weeks where we're looking at accumulating fatigue and progressively overloading, we might just need a complete reduction in volume for all of our sessions, and that will allow us to have fewer deloads because we have better recovery. So if you constantly feel beat up, you constantly, are experiencing those symptoms and you feel like, wow, I need to deload all the time, could just be a case that the overall volume of your training is too hard. And in most cases, beginners don't need to deload. Intermediates very rarely need to deload. Advanced lifters, pretty in tune with their body. They'll know when and if they need a little rest. I'm going to say a lot of the anti sort of deload, and there's no such thing as overtraining crowd. A lot of those people are already onto the right sort of training and they're not doing high volume. They're having plenty of rest days. They're usually training something like upper lower rest. So their frequency is quite low. In those cases, maybe you can get away with fewer and fewer deloads. And in those cases, those people are probably so in tune with their body that they're already auto-regulating, and without realizing they're throwing in sort of lighter sessions or pulling back on certain movements when they feel a bit beaten up, but they're not counting as a deload. And they're saying, oh, deload is for like pansies and stuff like that, but they do auto-regulate and they do deload in their own way, but they just don't count it as a deload. They don't record it, they don't put it on camera, but there is some reduction in volume or weight that people will throw into their training just to help keep everything moving, keep the ball rolling. It's not losing progress, taking a week off. You'll come back bigger and stronger, and hopefully with more mental clarity to work harder towards those goals. It's just the best way to keep on making progress, hopefully indefinitely, is when that fatigue accumulates. We cut it back down, we recover a little bit better, we go a little bit harder next time. That's going to wrap up the video. I hope I haven't prattled on too long, and I'd just like to say thank you guys very much for watching. You can like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you think deloads are needed, necessary or not. Let me know if you deload. What sort of deload methods do you use? Do you take the volume down, the intensity down? Do you just take the week off? Me personally, I like to auto-regulate per muscle part, per muscle group. As I feel my chest get sore, I'll pull back on my chest volume for a little bit. As I feel my legs get sore, I'll pull back on my leg volume a little bit. As I feel my lower back and my CNS and sort of an overarching sort of fatigue, I'll maybe take a week where those sets come down a little bit and I'll keep that weight up nice and heavy. And sometimes I'll even just say, is this just fatigue that I can manage, that I can push through? And if the logbook confirms, no, I can't push through it, then I'll do it. So sometimes I do get a little bit cheeky and I just, I say, oh, I feel beat up, but maybe it's just in here and I can push past it. And I'd say that should be the way you go. You should always try and mentally push through those barriers before you start taking days off, weeks off. But just listen to your body is the best way to go for it. Deloads are a crucial part of continuing to make progress. So thank you guys for watching.